Nate, our sister Elena, and I grew up in an outdoorsy family. For both of us, our earliest memories are filled with stories of hunting, fishing, and camping in our home, Alaska. Our grandparents came to the state a generation ago in pursuit of adventure. My dad's dad helped design the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. My mom's dad raced the mighty Iditarod sled dog race, twice. Our own parents, who are both extremely competent outdoorsmen in their own right, passed on that spirit of adventure to their children. Being outdoors was in our blood. When my family moved to Colorado in 2014, I discovered a deep love of the mountains while climbing Long's Peak with my dad. It was an unbelievably impactful day in my life. It made me want to engage in a type of adventure that was still fairly new to me at the time, one where you traveled through nature using your own skill and fitness rather than an ATV or a boat. I started to experiment with rock climbing, trail running, and generally exploring the mountains with human-powered efforts. I developed a passion for remote, wild places, and that only grew when I moved back to Alaska. There, I made it my goal to constantly learn new skills and experience new adventures. I hunted Dall sheep in the Wrangell Mountains, I climbed frozen waterfalls, and trekked through uninhabited valleys. Alaska was Colorado on steroids, and I loved every minute of it. Nate is 7 years younger than me, and we have been doing stuff together outside basically since he was born. When I moved out, he was just starting middle school and discovering his own unique passion for the outdoors. He dove headfirst into the competitive rock climbing world and very quickly developed skills in that field that I can only hope to achieve someday. As he matured, we bonded more strongly than ever over our shared love of the outdoors. It really was only a matter of time before we began planning some really ambitious objectives together.
What's up, y'all? It is 4:15 in the morning, and we are starting our attempt of the Crestone Traverse.
One of the first major trips Nate and I did together was a route known as the Crestone Traverse. It's a semi-technical line that links two of Colorado's most difficult 14ers together to a single route with over 6,000 feet of vertical and hours of exposed scrambling. The trip was incredible. Nate was only 14 at the time, but he shocked the other climbers on the route that day with his maturity and just general competence. To me, the trip showed that he was not a little kid anymore. He was ready to start tackling big outings with high consequences. After the Crestones, Nate and I started pushing ourselves outdoors whenever we got together. We scaled multi-pitch rock walls, ran 30-mile sections of the Colorado Trail, and climbed remote peaks in Alaska's Chugach mountain range. As our confidence grew, so did our desire to seek out greater adventures. Enter the Brooks Range. The Brooks Range represents the epitome of wilderness. Lying hundreds of miles north of the Arctic Circle, this pristine tract of jagged peaks is punctuated by only a single dirt road called the Dalton Highway. It truly is one of the most remote, untouched places left on Earth. After months of research, Nate and I decided to put all of our outdoor experience to the test with a 1-week pack rafting trip through the craggy heart of the range. Starting in my home of Anchorage, we would travel north to Fairbanks. Next, a 16-hour, 400-mile bus ride along the bumpy Dalton Highway would take us to the north side of the Brooks. From there, we would follow the Ribdon River on foot for more than 60 miles across the tundra and through the mountains. At the extreme headwaters of the Ribdon, we would climb over a steep pass to the mighty Ivishak River. We would ultimately follow that river for more than 100 miles until it rejoined the Dalton Highway a mere 60 miles south of the Arctic Ocean. In total, the trip would involve nearly 170 miles of human-powered traveling. It truly was an Alaska-sized adventure, and we couldn't wait to get started. In late July of 2022, Nate boarded a plane for Anchorage to make the trip a reality. Before we could head north, we had a lot of preparation to do. We started by getting Nate some pack rafting experience on local rivers. My wife Becca even helped, guiding Nate down Campbell Creek to practice avoiding sweepers. There was a lot of gear to pack. We needed to carry everything we might need with us on our backs, including all of our pack rafting gear and up to 20 pounds of food each. Trying to achieve this while keeping our backpack weight manageable was a difficult task, but it was just part of the challenge. After going through our checklists countless times, we were finally ready to start the adventure with a 6-hour drive north to Fairbanks. The next morning, we boarded a beefed-up van called the Dalton Highway Express, bound for the Brooks Range. Our fellow passengers included a British cyclist attempting to ride the entire length of the Western Hemisphere, and a pair of Norwegian women preparing to spend over a month floating the Noatak River. Together, we made up a ragtag group of extreme adventurers, traveling past the edge of civilization to experience things that most people back home could hardly dream of.
Alright, we have made it, folks. We are on the North Slope. And so that's where we're going. Those mountains, way the heck over there, and then deep into them. That's the bus. And it's about to leave.
As the van drove away, the gravity of our decision to embark on this journey set in. For the next week, we would have nothing but our skill, fitness, and gear to travel more than 100 miles through the uninhabited Arctic. It sounds really dramatic when you put it that way, but it was the situation we were in. there was nothing left to do but cross the river and start our journey into the mountains.
Caleb crossing over the sag.
The next morning, we woke to thick fog and low clouds. We needed to cover more than 20 miles our first full day of hiking, so we wasted no time in getting underway.
Alright, so it is morning of day 2. We have got camp packed up, and it got overcast during the night. There was kind of a big wall of clouds that moved in late. Spotted our first muskox. They're too far away to show on the camera, but pretty cool. Big animals.
Some mosquitoes.
We made it. Kind of 22 miles and a heck of a lot of work. We're in the tent now, all set up, had dinner. It was a long hike. It was a really long hike, and we have to do it again tomorrow. Had to hike a little bit extra far because right about where we wanted to set up our tent, there was a grizzly bear. We're gonna hike like another 20 tomorrow, but each day to its own. Anyways, gonna get some sleep and hit it again.
We emerged from our tent the following morning to even more fog and clouds. Our route for the day would take us through the mountains to the bottom of the pass between the Ribdon and Ivishak. By that evening, we would have already covered more than 50 miles of hiking in just 2.5 days.
Alright, day 2 is done. We are getting ready to go to sleep. It's like 11 o'clock now, and it is still really bright. 22 miles today, so back-to-back 22 miles, pretty impressive. We have about 4 miles to the top of the pass tomorrow, and then hike a ways further than that. We have been burning a ridiculous number of calories. Surprisingly happy with how well our bodies did, especially when we got food. Food's a good thing.
Our third full day of hiking was to be the day that we climbed over the pass between the Ribdon and Ivishak Rivers. Beyond the pass, we would follow a steep, technical, and in places treacherous canyon for nearly 10 miles before emerging into a broad valley to camp. With more than 50 miles of hiking on our blistered feet already, it would unquestionably be the hardest day of the trip. But that morning, we were greeted by no fog and views unlike any either of us had ever seen. The brooks were absolutely living up to their reputation of being wild and beautiful.
Last day, whoop whoop. Hoping for like 12 to 15 miles today, just depending on how we're feeling, and we're both feeling it today. Me, maybe a little bit more, but all things considered, doing pretty well. It is absolutely spectacular here, and the fog has cleared.
Crossed over the pass, made it to the Ivishak. It's not quite floatable yet. I think there's almost enough water, but it's super shallow still, and it's braided out. So there's a major tributary that's going to hit it here in about 2 miles or so. We're really hoping we can float it from there. Our legs are shot. Nate and I are both walking with a pretty significant limp right now. We did 5 miles the first night, then 22, 22, and 16 today, with today being by far the toughest of those miles. We should get to some floatable water tomorrow, and life will be good. We managed to finish our pass day only a few miles from floatable water. From this point, we still had more than 100 miles to travel on the Ivishak River, but with the vast majority of that being floating, the most strenuous part of the trip was now behind us. The chaos of trying to let gear dry out in the brilliant, brilliant sunlight.
Alright, a little bit of chaos, but we are blowing up the pack raft. River looks pretty floatable. We're gonna find out here soon, but we're very tired. So we decided to get to sit down for a couple of days and use our arms instead of our legs.
The floating was every bit as incredible as the hiking. Drifting down the crystal clear braided channels of the Ivishak, surrounded by the spectacular peaks, it was an absolutely surreal experience. We both knew that each bend of the river brought us closer to the end of our adventure, but we still reveled in every moment. It took us about 2.5 days to drift to the northern edge of the brooks. From there, we would continue another 40 miles north to where we could rejoin the Dalton. The weather turned less than ideal during this time, with wind, rain, and temperatures in the 30s. Still, the Arctic tundra remained a place of pristine beauty, and we were beyond grateful for the opportunity to be there. Almost exactly a week after watching the bus drive away, we once again came into view of the Dalton. After a short hike across the tundra, we inflated our pack rafts one final time to cross the Sag River once more and rejoin civilization. Though still hundreds of miles away from any real towns, the sense of complete wilderness we had spent the past week immersed in was shattered by high-speed cell service from a nearby oil facility. Early the next morning, we crossed under the famous Trans-Alaska Pipeline and once more boarded the van for the long journey home. There are things we do in life that impact us in ways we don't completely understand, at least not at first. Traveling across the Arctic with my brother was one of those experiences. The trip was hard, really hard at times, but it was also unspeakably beautiful and deeply fulfilling. The Brooks Range is a place far removed from the busyness of our day-to-day lives. To quote mountaineer Charles Houston, "It is a chance to be briefly free of the small concerns of our common lives, to strip off the non-essentials and come down to the core of life itself: food, shelter, friends. These are the essentials." Nate and my expedition bonded us in a way few siblings have the privilege of experiencing, and in doing so, it forged a path for us to share a lifetime of adventures. But no matter what amazing experiences may lie in our future, I know we have both been forever changed by our journey to the Ivishak.